Lisa was making her morning coffee when she heard the mail truck pull away from her front door. It was just another ordinary Tuesday in her quiet neighborhood. She walked to her mailbox in her slippers, expecting the usual bills and advertisements. But there, between a credit card offer and the electric bill, was a thick white envelope with a law firm's name printed in elegant letters across the top. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw her name written in formal black ink. Lisa Rodriguez had never received mail from a lawyer before, and her mind immediately raced to worst-case scenarios. Was someone suing her? Had she forgotten to pay some important bill? Her hands trembled slightly as she tore open the envelope. The letter inside was typed on expensive paper, the kind that felt heavy and important. As she read the first line, her coffee mug nearly slipped from her other hand. Her ex-husband, Michael, had died. Just like that. Gone at 58 years old from a sudden heart attack while playing tennis at his country club. Lisa had to sit down on her front steps to process this news. Michael, the man she had once loved enough to marry, the father of her daughter, the same man who had broken her heart and turned her life upside down 15 years ago. She hadn't spoken to him in over 3 years. Not since their daughter Amy graduated college and they no longer needed to coordinate anything. But the letter didn't stop there. The lawyer was requesting her presence at the reading of Michael's will. This Friday at 2 in the afternoon. Lisa read that part 3 times, thinking she must have misunderstood something. Why would she need to be there? She and Michael had been divorced for 15 years. They had barely been civil to each other during their daughter's childhood, only managing polite conversations at Amy's school events and graduation. The front door opened behind her, and her husband Tom appeared with his work shirt half-buttoned, rushing to get ready for his job at the construction company. When he saw her sitting on the steps with the letter in her hands, his expression immediately shifted to concern. "What's wrong, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." Lisa handed him the letter without saying a word. Tom had always been the steady, calm presence in her life. Where Michael had been unpredictable and selfish, Tom was reliable and kind. He had stepped into Amy's life when she was just 8 years old and loved her like his own daughter, never trying to replace her father but always being there when Michael wasn't. Tom read the letter twice, his eyebrows rising higher with each sentence. "Michael's gone? I can't believe it. And they want you at the will reading? That's strange." Lisa nodded, still feeling numb. "I keep thinking there must be some mistake. We haven't talked in years. The last time I saw him was at Amy's college graduation, and even then we just exchanged pleasantries about the weather." She remembered that day clearly. Michael had shown up with his second wife, Patricia, both of them dressed in expensive clothes, and acting like they owned the place. Patricia had barely acknowledged Lisa's existence, and Michael had seemed uncomfortable the entire time, as if being in the same space as his ex-wife was somehow beneath him. Tom sat down beside her on the steps. "Maybe it has something to do with Amy? You know, some kind of guardianship thing even though she's an adult now?" Lisa shook her head. "Amy's 23 and completely independent. She has her own apartment, her own job. There's nothing she would need guardianship for." The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. During their bitter divorce, Michael had fought her on everything: child support, custody schedules, even who got to keep their wedding china. His lawyer had painted her as an unfit mother trying to limit her time with Amy. The whole process had been humiliating and exhausting. After the divorce was final, Michael had quickly moved on with his life. Within a year, he was dating Patricia, a younger woman who worked at his accounting firm. They married 2 years later in a lavish ceremony that Amy had described to Lisa in careful, diplomatic terms, clearly trying not to hurt her mother's feelings. Meanwhile, Lisa had struggled. She worked 2 jobs just to keep up with the mortgage on their small house and make sure Amy had everything she needed. Michael paid his court-ordered child support, but it barely covered half of Amy's expenses. Lisa remembered working at the department store during the day and cleaning offices at night, coming home exhausted but determined to provide for her daughter. Those had been the hardest years of her life. She'd felt like a failure as a wife and worried constantly about being a good enough mother. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. But then Tom had come into their lives. She'd met him at Amy's soccer game when his nephew was playing on the same team. He was divorced too, with no children of his own, and he understood the challenges of starting over. Their relationship had grown slowly, built on friendship and respect rather than the passionate whirlwind that had characterized her marriage to Michael. Tom had been patient with both Lisa and Amy, never pushing too hard but always being present. He'd helped with homework, attended school plays, and taught Amy how to change a tire. When Amy graduated high school as valedictorian, Tom had been just as proud as Lisa, even though Amy had chosen to have both Tom and Michael walk her across the stage. Now, 5 years into their marriage, Lisa finally felt stable and happy. She and Tom had paid off most of their debts, they'd renovated their little house, and Lisa had been able to quit her night job. Life was good, peaceful even, which made this letter even more confusing and unsettling. "Maybe I shouldn't go," Lisa said, looking at Tom. "I mean, what's the point? It's probably just going to be uncomfortable for everyone. Patricia will be there and Michael's parents, and they never liked me even when I was married to their son." Lisa remembered Michael's parents all too well. His mother had always made little comments about Lisa's cooking, her housekeeping, her parenting. Nothing directly cruel, but enough to make Lisa feel inadequate. His father had been more subtle but equally dismissive, treating Lisa like she wasn't quite good enough for their successful son. During the divorce, they had made their loyalties crystal clear. They'd supported Michael completely, even helping him pay for his expensive lawyer. They'd never reached out to Lisa afterward, not even to maintain a relationship with their granddaughter. Amy had to make all the effort if she wanted to see her grandparents. Tom squeezed her hand. "You know what? Maybe you should go. Not for them, but for yourself. And for Amy. If there's something in that will that involves her, you should be there, to make sure her interests are protected." Lisa hadn't thought about it that way. Amy was currently working at a nonprofit organization, helping kids who aged out of foster care. She loved her job but didn't make much money. If Michael had left her something significant, it could really help her future. But Lisa also couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to be a disaster. Patricia had never hidden her resentment about Michael's first marriage and the child support he paid. Michael's family had always treated Lisa like an outsider. The thought of sitting in a room with all of them while Michael's final wishes were read aloud made her stomach turn. Still, as Tom pointed out, this wasn't really about her comfort. This was about Amy and making sure she got whatever her father had intended for her. Lisa owed her daughter that much, even if it meant enduring a few hours of uncomfortable stares and whispered comments. She folded the letter and stood up from the steps. "Okay, I'll go. But I'm not staying a minute longer than necessary." Friday afternoon came faster than Lisa wanted. She stood in front of her bedroom mirror, changing clothes for the 3rd time. "What do you wear to your ex-husband's will reading?" Everything felt wrong. Too casual seemed disrespectful, but too formal might look like she was trying too hard. Finally, she settled on a simple black dress and her good shoes, the ones Tom had bought her for their anniversary. Tom offered to drive her to the law office, but Lisa declined. She needed the time, alone, to prepare herself mentally. As she pulled into the parking lot of Caldwell & Associates, her hands were sweating on the steering wheel. The building was one of those fancy downtown offices with marble columns and expensive cars parked outside. It was exactly the kind of place Michael would choose, she thought. The elevator ride to the 7th floor felt like it took forever. Lisa checked her reflection in the polished steel doors, took a deep breath, and walked toward the reception desk. The secretary, a young woman with perfectly styled hair, smiled politely and directed her to conference room B. The moment Lisa opened the conference room door, she knew she had made a terrible mistake. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees as every pair of eyes turned toward her. Patricia sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, dressed in an expensive black suit that probably cost more than Lisa made in a month. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and her lips were pressed into a thin line of disapproval. Michael's parents, Robert and Helen, sat next to Patricia like bodyguards. Robert looked older than Lisa remembered, his gray hair now completely white, but his stern expression was exactly the same. Helen wore a black dress with pearls, the same pearls she had worn to Lisa and Michael's wedding 20 years ago. She didn't even acknowledge Lisa's presence, just stared straight ahead as if Lisa were invisible. Michael's sister Jennifer was there too, whispering something to her teenage son Danny. Lisa remembered when Danny was just a baby, how she used to babysit him sometimes when Jennifer needed help. Now he was 17 and looking at her like she was some kind of intruder who had wandered into the wrong room. The only friendly face belonged to Amy, Lisa's daughter, who sat near the middle of the table. Amy jumped up immediately and hugged her mother, but even she seemed tense and uncomfortable. She was wearing the black dress Lisa had helped her pick out for job interviews, and her usually bright smile was strained. "Mom, I'm so glad you came," Amy whispered. But Lisa could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Even her own daughter wasn't sure Lisa belonged there. Lisa took the empty chair next to Amy, trying to ignore the hostile stares burning into her back. The lawyer, Mr. Caldwell, was an older man with kind eyes who seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the tension in the room. He shuffled through papers on his desk, clearly waiting for the right moment to begin. Patricia cleared her throat loudly, the sound cutting through the silence like a knife. "I'm sorry, but I have to ask, why is she here?" She didn't even use Lisa's name, just pointed in her direction like she was indicating a piece of unwanted furniture. Lisa felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She had expected this, but it still stung. 20 years ago, she had been part of this family. She had cooked Thanksgiving dinners for these people, bought Christmas presents for their children, celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. Now she was treated like a complete stranger. Mr. Caldwell looked up from his papers. "Mrs. Patricia, everyone here was specifically requested to attend by your late husband. I'm simply following his explicit instructions." Patricia's face turned red. "That's impossible. Michael would never want her here. We haven't spoken to that woman in years. She has no business being involved in family matters." The way Patricia said that woman made Lisa's stomach twist. She felt like a teenager again, being scolded by the popular girls at school. Part of her wanted to stand up and leave right then, to spare herself any more humiliation. But Amy's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently, and Lisa remembered why she was there. Helen, Michael's mother, finally spoke up. Her voice was cold and sharp, the same tone she used to use when commenting on Lisa's housekeeping. "I have to agree with Patricia. This is highly inappropriate. Lisa hasn't been part of our family for 15 years. I can't imagine what Michael was thinking." Lisa wanted to point out that she was still Amy's mother, which made her connected to this family whether they liked it or not. But she bit her tongue. Getting into an argument wouldn't help anyone, especially not Amy. Jennifer joined in, her voice getting louder with each word. "This is ridiculous. Lisa walked away from this family when she divorced my brother. She doesn't get to show up now, that he's gone and pretend like she belongs here." Lisa's hands clenched in her lap. Walked away? She hadn't walked away from anything. Michael had cheated on her with Patricia, destroyed their marriage, and then fought her tooth and nail in divorce. Court. She had been the one trying to hold their family together while he was sneaking around with his coworker. But saying that out loud would only make things worse. These people had rewritten history in their minds, painting Michael as the victim and Lisa as the villain. No amount of truth would change their perspective now. Amy shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Lisa could see her daughter was torn between defending her mother and keeping the peace with her father's family. It wasn't fair to put Amy in that position. "Look," Patricia continued, her voice getting shriller. "I don't know what kind of game this is, but I won't sit here and pretend that woman has any right to be involved in my husband's affairs. She made her choice 15 years ago when she took him to court and tried to take everything he had worked for." Lisa almost laughed at the irony. Take everything? Michael had been the one with the expensive lawyer, the one who had tried to minimize his child support payments, the one who had hidden assets during their divorce proceedings. Lisa had barely managed to keep their small house and get enough support to raise Amy properly. Danny, Jennifer's son, was staring at Lisa like she was some kind of exotic animal at the zoo. She remembered when he was little, how he used to run to her with scraped knees and ask for Band-Aids. Now he looked at her with the same suspicion as the rest of his family. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat again, louder this time. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand this is an emotional time for everyone. However, I must ask that we proceed with the reading of the will. Mr. Michael's instructions were very clear about who should be present. Patricia slammed her hand on the table. I don't care what those instructions say. This is wrong, and everyone in this room knows it. That woman has no business here, and I want her to leave. Now. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Lisa could feel her face burning with shame and anger. She had known this would be difficult, but she hadn't expected such open hostility. These people were treating her like she had committed some terrible crime, when all she had done was try to rebuild her life after Michael destroyed their marriage. Amy squeezed her mother's hand again, and Lisa could see tears forming in her daughter's eyes. This was supposed to be about saying goodbye to Amy's father, about honoring his memory and his final wishes. Instead, it had turned into a public humiliation for Lisa and an uncomfortable situation for Amy. Lisa started to gather, her purse ready to leave and spare everyone further drama. She had tried to do the right thing by coming, but clearly her presence was causing more harm than good. Amy would have to handle whatever came next on her own. Just as Lisa pushed back her chair to stand up, Mr. Caldwell spoke in a firm voice that cut through the tension. I'm going to begin reading the will now. Everyone who was requested to be here will remain here until I'm finished. Those are my client's wishes, and I intend to honor them. Mr. Caldwell adjusted his glasses and opened the thick folder containing Michael's will. The room went completely silent except for the sound of papers rustling. Lisa could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She was still half standing, ready to leave, but something in the lawyer's tone made her pause. Patricia sat back in her chair with a satisfied smile, clearly expecting to hear good news. She had probably already mentally spent whatever Michael had left her. Helen and Robert, Michael's parents, straightened up in their seats, looking confident and entitled. Jennifer stopped whispering to her son and focused on the lawyer with bright, expectant eyes. The last will and testament of Michael, James Rodriguez, Mr. Caldwell began, his voice formal and steady, written and signed on March 15th of this year, witnessed by 2 independent parties and notarized according to state law. March 15th. That was only 4 months ago. Lisa wondered what had prompted Michael to update his will so recently. Had he been sick? Had something happened that made him think about his mortality? Amy reached over and took her mother's hand again. Lisa could feel her daughter's fingers trembling slightly. Whatever was in this will, it was going to change Amy's life in some way. Lisa just hoped it would be for the better. I, Michael James Rodriguez, being of sound mind and body, do hereby distribute my earthly possessions as follows. Mr. Caldwell continued. First, to my beloved daughter Amy, I leave my collection of classic cars, including the 1967 Mustang, the 1970 Camaro, and the 1969 Corvette, along with the sum of $50,000 to help secure her future. Amy gasped and covered her mouth with her free hand. $50,000 was more money than she had ever seen at one time. Lisa squeezed her daughter's hand, feeling genuinely happy for her. Michael might have been a terrible husband, but he had always loved Amy in his own way. Patricia's smile grew wider. If Michael was giving away $50,000 to his daughter, surely his wife would receive much more. She adjusted her jewelry and sat up straighter, preparing to receive her inheritance with grace. To my parents, Robert and Helen Rodriguez, I leave $25,000 each, along with my eternal gratitude for the love and support they provided throughout my life. Robert nodded approvingly while Helen smiled with satisfaction. They had clearly expected something like this. They were comfortable financially, but extra money was always nice, especially when it came with their son's public acknowledgement of their worth. To my sister Jennifer and her son Danny, I leave $15,000 each with the hope that Danny will use his portion for his college education. Jennifer actually clapped her hands together quietly, and Danny's eyes went wide. $15,000 would definitely help with college expenses. Lisa found herself feeling glad for them, despite how they had treated her. Mr. Caldwell paused and took a sip of water. The moment felt dramatic, like the calm before a storm. Patricia was practically glowing with anticipation. This was it. Her moment. To my wife Patricia, I leave our house in Colorado, the cabin by the lake, and the sum of $100,000, along with my love and appreciation for the years we shared together. Patricia's smile faltered just slightly. $100,000 was certainly nothing to complain about, plus she got both houses. But something in the lawyer's tone suggested he wasn't finished. There seemed to be more to come. Lisa started to relax a little. Amy had been taken care of, everyone else had received something reasonable, and Patricia had gotten what appeared to be the bulk of the estate. This meant Lisa could leave soon, and put this uncomfortable experience behind her, but Mr. Caldwell wasn't done reading. However, he continued, and that single word changed everything in the room. Patricia's smile disappeared completely. Robert and Helen leaned forward in their chairs. Jennifer stopped celebrating and focused intently on the lawyer. However, the remainder of my estate, including my business holdings, investment portfolio, retirement accounts, the primary family residence, and all other assets not previously mentioned, totaling approximately $2.3 million. I leave to Lisa Rodriguez, my former wife and the mother of my daughter. The room exploded. Patricia shot out of her chair so fast that it tipped over backward and crashed to the floor. "What?" she screamed, her face turning bright red. "That's impossible. There has to be a mistake. Read it again." But Lisa couldn't hear Patricia's screaming anymore. Everything sounded like it was coming from underwater. $2.3 million. The number kept bouncing around in her head, but it didn't make any sense. Michael hated her. He had spent years making her life difficult. Why would he leave her anything, let alone millions of dollars? Robert was on his feet too, pointing an accusing finger at Lisa. "This is fraud. She must have tricked him somehow. My son would never do this." Helen was crying angry tears, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks. 15 years. 15 years we haven't spoken to that woman, and now she gets everything? How is that possible? Jennifer was shouting something about lawyers and court challenges, while Danny sat frozen in his chair, staring at Lisa like she had suddenly grown a second head. Through all the chaos, Amy was the only one who stayed calm. She was staring at her mother with wide eyes, not angry or upset, just completely shocked. "Mom," she whispered. But Lisa couldn't respond. She felt like she might faint. Mr. Caldwell was trying to restore order, raising his voice over the shouting. "Please, everyone sit down. Let me finish reading the will." But Patricia wasn't having any of it. She marched around the table toward Lisa, her face twisted with rage. "You conniving witch! I don't know how you did this, but I'll fight it. You won't see a penny of Michael's money. Not one penny." Lisa finally found her voice. "I don't understand," she said weakly. "There has to be some mistake. Why would Michael—" "Because you manipulated him," Patricia shrieked. "You probably threatened him, or blackmailed him, or got to him when he was sick and vulnerable." Amy stood up and stepped between her mother and Patricia. "Stop it, just stop. My father wasn't vulnerable or sick. He made this decision for his own reasons." But Patricia wasn't listening. She was too busy having what looked like a complete breakdown. Her perfect hair was falling out of its bun, her makeup was smeared, and she looked like she might physically attack someone. Robert tried a different approach. He sat back down and spoke in a measured tone, but Lisa could see the fury in his eyes. "There has to be an explanation for this. Michael was angry at Lisa for years. He complained about her constantly. This doesn't make any sense." Helen nodded vigorously. "She must have done something. Maybe she has some kind of dirt on him, some secret she was threatening to expose." Lisa's head was spinning. She had never threatened Michael with anything. She had barely spoken to him in years. The last conversation they'd had was about Amy's graduation party planning, and even that had been brief and polite. Mr. Caldwell finally managed to get everyone's attention by standing up and speaking loudly. There is more to the will. Mr. Rodriguez left detailed explanations for his decisions. If you would all please calm down, I can continue reading. Patricia whirled around to face him. Explanations? What kind of explanations? He left personal letters to be read aloud as part of the will reading. Specifically, he left a letter explaining his decision regarding the bulk of his estate. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence was thick with tension and anticipation. Everyone wanted to hear what Michael could possibly have said to justify this shocking decision. Lisa sank back into her chair, her legs feeling too weak to support her. Amy sat down beside her and took her hand again. Whatever Michael's explanation was, Lisa had a feeling it was going to change everything she thought she knew about her ex-husband and their relationship. Mr. Caldwell pulled out a sealed envelope and carefully opened it. This is a letter written by Michael Rodriguez, dated the same day as his will. He requested that it be read aloud to all parties present at the will reading. Patricia's hands were clenched into fists at her sides. "Read it," she said through gritted teeth. And so Mr. Caldwell began to read the letter that would explain everything. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat and began reading Michael's letter in a steady voice. To everyone gathered here today, especially to Lisa, I know this will come as a shock. I know many of you are angry and confused. I need you to understand why I made these decisions. Patricia was still standing, her arms crossed tightly across her chest, but she was listening. Everyone in the room was completely focused on the lawyer's voice. 3 years ago, I went to the doctor for what I thought was just heartburn. I'd been having chest pains and shortness of breath, but I figured it was just stress from work. The tests showed that I had developed heart disease. Not immediately life-threatening, but serious enough that my doctor told me I needed to make some major changes in my life. Lisa felt Amy's hand tighten around hers. Amy had never mentioned that her father was sick. Had Michael kept this information from his own daughter? Mr. Caldwell continued reading. The diagnosis forced me to think about my life in a way I never had before. When you realize you might not have as much time left as you thought, you start looking at things differently. You start remembering things you tried to forget. Helen was crying now, but quietly. The anger in her face had been replaced by sadness and confusion. Her son had been sick for 3 years and never told her. I started thinking about my marriage to Lisa, about our divorce, about the kind of man I was during those years, and I realized something that made me sick to my stomach. I had been lying to myself and to all of you for 15 years. Patricia's face went pale. She slowly sat back down in her chair, looking like she might be sick herself. The truth is, Lisa never did anything wrong in our marriage. She was a good wife, a wonderful mother, and a hard-working partner. She supported my dreams, took care of our home, and loved me completely. And I threw it all away because I was selfish and stupid. Lisa couldn't believe what she was hearing. For 15 years, she had wondered if maybe the divorce really was her fault somehow. Maybe she hadn't been a good enough wife. Maybe she had failed Michael in some way she didn't understand. I had an affair with Patricia while Lisa was pregnant with Amy. Not after Amy was born, like I told everyone. While Lisa was carrying our child, dealing with morning sickness and working full-time to help support us, I was sneaking around behind her back. The room was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Patricia looked like she had been slapped. She was staring at the table, her face bright red with shame. When Lisa found out about the affair, she tried to save our marriage. She suggested counseling, took time off work so we could talk, even offered to forgive me if I would just end things with Patricia and commit to our family. But I was too proud and too selfish to admit I had made a mistake. Lisa remembered those awful months clearly. She had been desperate to keep their family together, willing to do anything to make their marriage work. She had blamed herself for not being attractive enough, not interesting enough, not good enough to keep her husband faithful. Instead of taking responsibility for what I had done, I made Lisa the villain in our story. I told my family and friends that she was controlling, that she didn't understand me, that she was trying to keep me from being happy. I painted myself as the victim and her as the problem. Robert and Helen exchanged uncomfortable glances. They were starting to realize that they had been fed lies for 15 years. During our divorce, I hired the most aggressive lawyer I could find. I tried to minimize my child support payments, fought for custody I didn't really want, and made the whole process as difficult as possible for Lisa. Why? Because I was angry at myself, and it was easier to punish her than to face what I had done. Jennifer was crying now too. She remembered how she had supported her brother during the divorce, how she had helped spread stories about Lisa being difficult and unreasonable. I watched Lisa struggle as a single mother, working 2 jobs to keep Amy in good schools and make sure she had everything she needed. I was making good money, but I paid only the minimum child support the court required. I could have helped more, should have helped more, but my pride wouldn't let me. Amy was crying silently beside her mother. She had never known how hard those years had been for Lisa, how much her mother had sacrificed to give her a good life. I watched Lisa rebuild her life from nothing. She went back to school, got her degree, found a career she loved. She met Tom, a man who treated her the way I should have treated her, and she learned to trust and love again. I was jealous of her strength, her ability to move forward while I was stuck in my own bitterness. The letter continued, and Lisa could hardly believe what she was hearing. This was not the Michael she remembered, the man who had made her life so difficult during and after their divorce. Meanwhile, my relationship with Patricia was built on the foundation of my lies about Lisa. Patricia thought she was saving me from a terrible marriage, when really she was just helping me avoid responsibility for my own actions. Our marriage was good in many ways, but it was always shadowed by the guilt I carried about what I had done to Lisa and Amy. Patricia was no longer looking angry. She looked devastated, like her entire world had just collapsed around her. 5 years ago, I started following Lisa's life from a distance, not stalking, but just checking her social media, asking Amy casual questions about her mother. I saw that Lisa had not only survived what I put her through, but she had thrived. She was happy, successful, and surrounded by people who loved and respected her. Lisa thought about those years. She had been happy. After marrying Tom, she had finally felt secure and peaceful. She had started a small business helping other divorced women get back on their feet, something that gave her real purpose and satisfaction. I realized that everything good in my life had come from lessons I learned by watching Lisa handle adversity with grace and determination. My business success, my ability to be a better father to Amy as she got older, even my capacity to love Patricia. It all came from seeing how Lisa lived her life with integrity and kindness despite everything I had put her through. The lawyer paused to take a sip of water. Everyone in the room was completely absorbed in Michael's words. I tried to find ways to make things right. I secretly paid for Amy's college expenses beyond what Lisa asked for. I donated money to the shelter where Lisa volunteered. I even had my accountant send anonymous gifts to help with her business. But none of that was enough to balance the scales of what I owed her. Lisa's mind was racing. There had been several times over the years when unexpected help had appeared. A scholarship Amy didn't remember applying for. A donation to the women's shelter that came at the perfect time. A business loan she had been approved for when she shouldn't have qualified. When I got sick, I knew I might not have much time left to make things right. This will is not just about money, it's about justice. It's about acknowledging the truth that I was too proud to admit while I was alive. Amy was crying harder now, finally understanding the full scope of what had happened between her parents. Lisa deserves this inheritance not because I love her, though I never stopped loving her, but because she earned it through 15 years of being everything I should have been but wasn't. She deserves to be financially secure. She deserves to have her sacrifices acknowledged. She deserves justice. 3 weeks after the will reading, Lisa sat in her lawyer's office staring at documents she never thought she would see. Patricia had hired 3 different attorneys and challenged the will from every possible angle. She claimed Michael wasn't mentally competent when he wrote it. She argued that Lisa had somehow influenced him. She even suggested that the will was a forgery. But Michael had been thorough. He had undergone psychological evaluation just 2 weeks before signing the will, proving his mental competency beyond any doubt. The document had been witnessed by two independent parties who didn't know Lisa or anyone else in the family. The handwriting analysis confirmed every signature was authentic. Lisa's own lawyer, a kind woman named Rebecca, smiled as she slid the final papers across the desk. "It's over, Lisa. The will stands. Patricia's appeals have been exhausted and the estate is officially yours." Lisa signed the papers with shaking hands. Even after 3 weeks, she still couldn't quite believe this was real. $2.3 million. It was more money than she had ever imagined having in her entire life. The first thing Lisa did was drive to Amy's apartment. Her daughter was sitting on her tiny couch, still processing everything that had happened. Amy had been quiet since the will reading, struggling to understand this new version of her father that had been revealed in his letter. "Mom, I keep thinking about all those times Dad complained about money," Amy said, as Lisa sat down beside her. "He would make comments about how expensive things were, how tight money was. But he had millions of dollars? I don't understand why he pretended to struggle." Lisa put her arm around her daughter. "Your father was a complicated man, honey. I think the money wasn't really about money. It was about control, about maintaining the story he had created about our divorce." Amy leaned against her mother's shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I didn't know how hard things were for you. I'm sorry I believed his version of what happened." "You were a child," Lisa said firmly. "None of this was your responsibility. Your father and I should have handled things better, but that's not on you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while before Amy spoke again. "What are you going to do with all that money?" Lisa had been thinking about that constantly. The amount was overwhelming, but she had some ideas. "Well, first I'm going to pay off our house completely, and Tom's been wanting to expand his business. For years, I think it's time to make that happen." Amy smiled. "Tom's going to flip out. He's been talking about hiring more people and getting that bigger office space. And I want to pay off your student loans completely," Lisa continued. "You shouldn't start your career buried in debt." "Mom, that's too much. I can handle my loans." "It's not too much," Lisa said. "Your father wanted to take care of you, and now I can do that properly." Over the next few months, Lisa discovered that having money was both easier and harder than she had expected. Paying off debts and helping her family felt wonderful, but dealing with everyone's reactions was complicated. Tom had been stunned when she told him about the inheritance. He had insisted they keep their finances separate even after the money came through. Worried that people would think he had married her for financial gain, it took weeks of conversations before he finally agreed to let her invest in his accounting firm. "I just don't want people to think I'm taking advantage of you," he said one evening, as they sat on their newly renovated back porch. "Tom, you've been taking care of me and Amy for years without expecting anything in return. If anyone deserves to benefit from this money, it's you." The expansion of Tom's business turned out to be one of the best decisions Lisa made. Within 6 months, he had hired 4 new employees and moved into a larger office. His client list doubled, and for the first time in his life, Tom was making really good money from work he loved. But Lisa's biggest project was something she had never expected to do. She used a significant portion of the inheritance to start a foundation for divorced women who were struggling financially. She called it the Fresh Start Foundation, and it provided everything from legal assistance to job training to emergency financial help. "I know what it feels like to be drowning after a divorce," Lisa explained to the reporter who interviewed her when the foundation opened. "I know what it's like to work 2 jobs and still not have enough money to feel secure. If I can help other women avoid that struggle, then something good will have come from all of this." The foundation became Lisa's passion. She worked there 3 days a week, personally interviewing women who needed help and designing programs to give them the tools they needed to rebuild their lives. It felt like the most meaningful work she had ever done. Meanwhile, the rest of Michael's family was slowly coming to terms with what had happened. Robert and Helen, Michael's parents, reached out to Lisa 6 months after the will reading. The conversation was awkward at first, but they wanted to apologize for how they had treated her during and after the divorce. "We believed Michael's version of events," Helen said quietly during their coffee meeting. We should have made more effort to maintain a relationship with you for Amy's sake, regardless of what we thought had happened. Robert nodded. We missed so many years with our granddaughter because we were too proud to admit we might have been wrong. We'd like to change that if you're willing. Lisa was willing. Life was too short to hold grudges, and Amy deserved to have relationships with her grandparents. They started slowly, with occasional dinners and birthday celebrations, but gradually rebuilt a family connection that had been broken for years. Jennifer, Michael's sister, took longer to come around. The revelation that she had spent years spreading lies about Lisa was hard for her to face, but eventually she reached out too, wanting to make amends and rebuild a relationship with Amy. Patricia, however, never recovered from the shock. She sold the Colorado house and the cabin, took her inheritance and moved across the country to live near her sister. Lisa heard through Amy that Patricia had started therapy to deal with the revelation that her marriage had been built on lies about Lisa. A year after the will reading, Lisa found herself in a place she never could have imagined. She was financially secure for the first time in her adult life. Her marriage to Tom was stronger than ever. Amy was thriving in her career and had started graduate school to become a social worker. The foundation was helping dozens of women every month. But perhaps most importantly, Lisa had found peace with her past. For 15 years, she had carried a small voice in the back of her mind that wondered if maybe she really had been a bad wife, if maybe the divorce really was her fault. Michael's letter had finally silenced that voice. "Do you think Dad found peace before he died?" Amy asked one evening, as they volunteered together at the Foundation's job training program. Lisa thought about that for a long moment. "I think writing that letter and changing his will was his way of finding peace. He couldn't take back what he did, but he could finally tell the truth about it." Amy nodded. "I miss him, even knowing everything I know now." "That's okay," Lisa said. "You can miss someone and still acknowledge that they made mistakes. People are complicated." As Lisa drove home that night, she reflected on how much her life had changed. The money had certainly made things easier, but the real gift Michael had given her wasn't financial. It was validation. It was the acknowledgement that she had been a good wife and mother, that the failure of their marriage wasn't her fault, and that she had earned everything good that had come after. She pulled into her driveway and saw Tom waiting for her on the porch, a cup of tea in his hands and a smile on his face. This was her real inheritance, the life she had built through her own strength, the love she had found with a man who truly valued her, and the knowledge that justice, sometimes, really does prevail.